If you're starting out as a filmmaker, this is absolutely the first camera you should be getting, the Nikon ZR. The Nikon ZR is an incredibly easy to use, lightweight camera crammed with all sorts of cinematic grade science inside the camera. It's a very versatile camera that has the capability to push itself into some very high grade looking footage. And despite being a very small build camera with no internal fan, this camera is able to stay incredibly cool for up to 2 hours on 4K footage, all thanks to the magnesium alloy body inside the camera. So what you have here is a very lightweight and easy to use hybrid camera with the capability to pull out shadows and colors originally only reserved for high-end cinema grade cameras like the Komodo X. So the Nikon and RED relationship is a very interesting one. You have high-end cinema grade cameras with a very fast acting Nikon cameras. And what we've got in here is, first off, we had like the internal LUTs and sort of color grade science getting put into the newer Nikon cameras. We also had a new Z mount attached to the most popular RED camera, the Komodo X. And now we have the Cinema ZR camera here, which is a very impressive sort of development. Basically, it has everything that your typical Nikon Z5 II or Z8 or Z9 has, but it leans more towards the cinema range of cameras or video qualities. And as far as new cameras go, this is probably the most significant step for Nikon into video, and it's a very impressive one if I say so myself. So this camera obviously has the RED codec inside it, R3D. It also does have its own ProRes format inside as well. And these are really good color spaces, as look, they initially do look washed out, but once you throw a LUT on them, you get all this room and development for color. The footage just looks incredibly rich and detailed. Honestly, I do love recording in this RED codec. It is a very large file size though, so do keep that in mind. There are a few workarounds, we will be talking about those. Now, the importance of the RED codec is basically you have so much more detail in the colors, which means you are able to actually isolate colors in video much more specifically. So in my case, it might be, say, the sweat or shine on a person's forehead. Sometimes I like to use translucent powder, but if you don't have that, you can actually remove that shine on the face by isolating those very specific color tones on their face and darken them down. Or maybe you can get something in the background and bring it down, or basically you can actually have more control over the colors, over the dynamic range, over the lighting of your footage when you're recording in this RED codec. If you're, say, doing street videography or you're doing your sort of Dogma 95 sort of filmmaking, the ZR is definitely going to give you a lot more room in post-production. But I will say that the RED files are very large, so you will actually find them to be quite cumbersome, especially when editing. Now, what's cool about this camera is while it does record all your RED clips, it would also record a secondary low-res MP4 clip. So what you're meant to do here is you actually edit everything on the low-res MP4 clips, and then when you're done doing all your cutting and throwing all your graphics over, you basically go in and you relink all that MP4 low-res video footage to your RED codec, and then it will swap out all those low-res clips with the new high-res RED clips. This is a much more efficient way if you're doing high-res video editing to always work off a low-res proxy clip instead. It does make your life much easier. Now, the body design is actually something that also is instantly recognizable and my second favorite thing outside the RED codec. So the body here is a very small camera, which is very impressive considering what this camera can do. And it's a very flat design, which is going to work great if you plan to put this camera on a gimbal, on a much larger rig. It basically does keep that discretion. And that's also useful if you want to sort of do some cinematic video, but you want to go to locations which are quite dangerous and you don't want to carry around a massive rig that will make you stick out like a sore thumb. It also does have a little bit of dust and splash resistance as well, so it is relatively well protected. That being said, I would recommend getting the new small rig cage that it came with. It's a pretty well designed cage, and honestly, it does fit the camera great without making it incredibly bulky. It does have a micro HDMI, which again, I understand that's kind of has to be in order to keep the camera small, but it is still something I've never liked. I always break micro HDMIs. Fortunately though, you can get a small rig HDMI adapter that will actually fit nicely onto the cage for this camera. And basically from there, you can have a full-size HDMI adapter if you absolutely need it. So one thing I think is probably the most ingenious design of this camera is probably how it manages to stay cool. So I can record 4K 60p footage and the camera won't overheat at up to 2 hours. And that's insane. So I can record like a long form review video like this and the camera won't be overheating. And basically this is because the camera does have a magnesium alloy body inside it. So basically this magnesium alloy body somehow by some weird miracle manages to keep the camera cool as it's shooting. So this metal is helping the air flow around. And yeah, I've had no issues with this camera overheating. All in all, this camera does manage to maintain a very simple and small design. The only little setback obviously is that micro HDMI, but again, I can basically add that. And I will also say, look, I'm more of a videographer and this is definitely more of a videographer camera. So unfortunately, this camera doesn't have an electronic viewfinder on it. So that's gonna bother a lot of photographers out there. So I would recommend probably going for something like the Z8 or Z9 if you're more of a photographer, especially considering this camera also doesn't have a mechanical shutter. It uses an electronic shutter, and that's also, again, how the camera is able to stay so small. So if you're someone that needs a mechanical shutter for your photography, you aren't going to be getting it inside this camera. I will say this camera does have basically all the bells and whistles of your more recent release Z cameras. So it has, you know, your focus stacking, your product focus, your skin softening, which I still can't get to work on these cameras. It still has all the internals and basic computational features of, say, a Z5 II, but it just doesn't have that mechanical shutter or the electronic viewfinder. So it's more of a video camera, and it has made a few sacrifices on the photo front in order to be that small, lightweight video camera. Now, usually I won't really talk about audio inside cameras, as I always recommend get your own external mic, as the audios in cameras are often, it's pretty bad, especially when you can sort of hear the person behind the camera more clearly than the person in front of the camera. So always get an external mic. But this camera has something that most cinema cameras don't have. It has something most cameras don't have, and I'm really excited about, and that's 32-bit audio. Now, for anyone that's into audio, you'll know that 32-bit audio is a big deal. For those of you that are not, 32-bit audio basically means you have an extra bit of room in the audio, so you have more detail and quality in the audio, but you also have room for if, say, someone speaks really loud and suddenly clips the audio. So I can go suddenly really loud like this, or talk like that, or do that, or just suddenly, like, you know, get really loud and just start talking up and down, up and down. People probably think I'm going insane. Well, I've already gone insane. I think they already know that. But the point is, with 32-bit audio, you have that extra bit of room, which means that your audio is that much less likely to clip. And this is going to matter a great deal when you're out and about. And maybe you do want to record some audio on this camera and you don't necessarily have a mic on you. So that freedom to not have clipping in your camera audio, that's such a new upgrade I've seen to cameras. And I think the Nikon ZR is the first camera I've seen that's actually utilized 32-bit audio. So really excited about that. That's pretty damn cool. Also, Nikon has released a new mic, the MED10, and this microphone basically operates in the same way as the ZR. It's 32-bit audio, it's a directional mic, and unlike the mic inside this camera, you can actually set the directions on this mic in any format. So N, RAW, or RED, you have all sorts of options with this microphone here.
Okay, so now I've got the directional mic on, and it's obviously directed at the front here at my voice, and this is what my voice currently sounds like. Even with this box machine in the background, you are picking up a bit more of my voice. It is a little bit more cleaner. I am now going to convert this mic to focus as opposed to pure, which it's currently set to. And this is focus, and this is what you're working with focus. So yeah.
So the stabilization in this camera is nothing too crazy. It's a 5-axis stabilization. I did find it was working perfectly fine for, like, you know, standard pans. And when I'm walking with the stabilization turned on, it does absorb some of my steps, but you know, you're still getting that little bit of shake. But this is a very lightweight, small camera, so I do find it actually fits quite easily on a gimbal, so stabilization isn't too much of an issue for me. And the camera also does have a full frame sensor, so if you do absolutely need to stabilize in post-production, you do have so much room on this full frame sensor to crop in and stabilize your footage then and there. Now, pricing. So I can't talk about specific pricing because, you know, pricing does change, but what's impressive about this camera is how cheap it is relative to other cinema grade cameras. Like, it's got this red science inside it, but it somehow manages to be, well, fairly inexpensive. And that's going to be great for anyone that's wanting to start out as a filmmaker, but again, anyone that needs a high quality B camera on the side. So again, like, I'm a Komodo X user, I would like to have a cheaper B camera on the side, and this camera would probably be it. Now, in terms of buying recommendations, obviously I recommend getting a CF Express B card that can hit up to 500 gigabytes, as if you do plan to record RED on this camera, you are going to be filling up that card like crazy. So get yourself a very large CF Express card. I would also recommend getting yourself the recently released small rig cage for this camera, as basically if you are getting into videography, you're going to want something that you can customize and add to, and it honestly is just a really good cage. You do of course have a kit lens that comes with some models of a ZR, such as the 24 to 50mm I believe. But honestly, if I was to get a lens for this camera, I'd just go for that 24 to 70 f2.8 S2. It's a great lens. You will get so much coverage with it. It does basically cover a great deal of your genres. It's a perfect start. So that's the Nikon ZR or ZR, depending on where you are. What do you think of the camera? Let me know in the comments below.